Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the busy trading post on Kepler 442b. The air was thick and humid, making it hard to breathe even with his suit's filters working at full power. Around him, dozens of alien species moved about their business, trading goods and information from across the galaxy. He stopped at a fuel station where a group of tall, blue-skinned Zephyrians were loading cargo onto their ship. Their leader, a merchant named Vextar, noticed Jake approaching and began laughing. The sound was high and sharp, like metal scraping against glass. "Look what we have here," Vextar said to his companions in their native tongue. Jake's translator buzzed in his ear, turning the alien words into English. "A human, still walking around in that metal suit like a child in armor." The other Zephyrians joined in the laughter. One of them, younger than the rest, pointed at Jake's backpack with its collection of research tools. "What are those primitive devices? Does the human still use machines with buttons and screens?" Jake kept walking, trying to ignore them, but Vexitar stepped into his path. The alien was nearly 7 feet tall, with long arms that ended in 6-fingered hands. His skin had a blue shimmer that changed color when he moved, and his eyes were large and black like pools of oil. "Human Jake Morrison," Vextar said, reading Jake's name from the identification badge on his suit. "I know who you are, the digger, the one who looks for old things in dirt and rocks." "I'm an archaeologist," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. "I study ancient civilizations." This made the aliens laugh even harder. A new voice joined in from behind Jake. He turned to see a Morton, one of the slug-like beings that controlled much of the galaxy's banking system. The creature was speaking through a mechanical translator attached to its slimy body. "Ancient civilizations," the Morton repeated in its flat electronic voice. "Humans always looking backward instead of forward. Your species has been in space. For what, 10 years? And already you think you understand the galaxy's history." More aliens began to gather around, drawn by the commotion. Jake recognized several species from his studies. There were insect-like Kavari with their sharp claws and compound eyes, energy beings called ethereals that glowed inside transparent suits, and a few others he couldn't identify. "Tell us, human," said one of the Kavari, its voice clicking like a typewriter. "What makes you think your primitive mind can understand things that happened before your planet even had complex life?" Jake felt his face getting hot with anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Every species has something to contribute to our understanding of the past. Human methods might be different, but they're not useless." "Different?" Vexitar's skin shifted to a deeper blue, which Jake knew meant amusement among Zephyrians. "Your entire species still uses chemical rockets to move between planets. Your weapons are metal bullets and simple lasers. Your computers are so slow they might as well be powered by hand cranks." The crowd of aliens laughed again. Jake noticed that even species that normally didn't get along were united in their amusement. At human expense, a group of traders from different worlds had stopped their negotiations to watch the show. "Your people sent exactly one colony ship to another star," continued the Kavari. "One ship. It took 50 years to reach its destination. The rest of us have been traveling between galaxies for thousands of years." "And that ship," added another Zephyrian, "was built with technology you barely understood. Half of it was copied from designs you found in crashed vessels from other species." Jake knew they were right about humanity's limited technology. Earth had only made contact with galactic civilization 12 years ago when a damaged alien scout ship crashed in the Pacific Ocean. The technology recovered from that ship had given humanity faster-than-light communication and basic energy shields, but compared to the rest of the galaxy, humans were still working with stone tools. "At least we're trying to learn," Jake said. "We're not content to just accept things as they are." "Learning?" The Morton's translator gave a sound like electronic laughter. "You call it learning when you dig holes in the ground looking for broken pottery? The galaxy moved beyond archaeology millennia ago. We have complete historical records going back millions of years. We know everything worth knowing about the past." "Then why are there still unexplored regions?" Jake asked. "Why are there planets marked as unknown on the galactic charts?" "Because they're not worth exploring," Vextar replied. Empty worlds with nothing but rocks and plants. No technology. No civilization, no value. Only humans would waste time on such places. Jake pulled out his data pad and showed them a star chart. I've been studying energy readings from the outer rim. There are patterns that don't match any known natural phenomena. Geometric arrangements of minerals, electromagnetic signatures that suggest artificial construction. The aliens looked at his data pad with obvious disdain. To them, Jake's research equipment looked like a child's toy compared to their neural interfaces and quantum computers. Human imagination, said the Kavari. You see patterns where none exist because your primitive brains are designed to find meaning in chaos. It's a survival trait from when your ancestors lived in caves. Besides, added Vextar, even if you did find something, what could you do with it? Your species can barely maintain the technology you already have. You certainly couldn't understand anything truly advanced. The crowd began to disperse as the novelty of mocking the human wore off. But Vextar wasn't finished yet. He stepped closer to Jake, his large black eyes reflecting the trading post's lights. I'll make you a deal, human. I need cargo delivered to Verdania Prime in the Outer Rim. It's exactly the kind of worthless jungle world you seem to love. I'll give you passage there for half the normal price. Maybe you can dig up some interesting rocks. Jake knew he was being mocked. But Verdania Prime was exactly where he wanted to go. His research had identified it as one of the most promising sites for ancient ruins. The planet had unusual mineral compositions and energy readings that didn't match any known geological processes, I'll take it, Jake said. Vextar's skin shifted colors again, this time showing surprise. Really? You actually want to go to that wasteland? I have work to do there. Of course you do. Vextar turned to his companions. The human wants to play in the dirt on Verdania Prime. Should we tell him about the dangerous wildlife? The toxic plants? The fact that no intelligent species has ever bothered to colonize it? Let him go, said the Morton. Maybe the jungle will teach him some humility, if he survives. As Jake completed the arrangements for passage, he could hear the aliens continuing to discuss him. They spoke about humans as if they were talking about a particularly stubborn pet species that refused to accept its limitations. They'll learn eventually, one of them said. Reality has a way of teaching harsh lessons to those who reach beyond their capabilities. Jake boarded the Zephyrian cargo ship 3 hours later, his research equipment secured in the small passenger compartment. Through the viewport, he could see the aliens still gathered at the trading post, probably still laughing about the foolish human who thought he could uncover secrets that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had missed. But Jake wasn't discouraged. Throughout human history, his species had been underestimated by those who thought they knew better. Every great discovery had been made by someone willing to look where others wouldn't, to dig deeper than anyone thought necessary. As the ship jumped to faster than light speed, heading toward the jungle world of Verdania Prime, Jake reviewed his research one more time. The energy signatures were definitely artificial. Something was buried on that planet, something that had been waiting for a very long time. He just hoped he would live long enough to find it. The jungle of Verdania Prime was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. Massive trees stretched up so high that their tops disappeared into a green canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Vines as thick as his arm hung down like natural. Ropes and strange flowers glowed with soft blue and purple light in the shadows. The air was so thick with moisture that Jake's suit had to work constantly to keep his visor clear. Every step forward was a struggle through mud that came up to his ankles and plants that seemed to grab at his equipment. Strange sounds echoed from all directions, calls and cries from animals he couldn't see, but that sounded much larger than anything he wanted to meet. Jake had been walking for 6 hours since the Zephyrian ship dropped him off at what they called a landing zone. It was really just a small clearing where the trees weren't quite so thick. The ship's crew had laughed as they watched him struggle with his heavy backpack full of research tools. Good luck finding your imaginary ruins, human, Vexitar had called out as the ship lifted off. Try not to become plant food. Now Jake was alone on a planet that the Galactic Council had surveyed 300 years ago and dismissed as biologically interesting but archaeologically worthless. According to their records, Verdania Prime had never supported intelligent life. It was just another jungle world with some unusual plants and animals. But Jake's equipment was telling a different story. His metal detector, crude by galactic standards but reliable, kept finding traces of refined metals buried deep in the ground. His electromagnetic scanner showed energy patterns that didn't match anything in nature. Most interesting of all, his seismic reader indicated that there was a massive hollow space about 3 kilometers below the surface. Jake stopped beside a stream to check his readings again. The water was crystal clear and moved with a gentle sound that was almost musical. He knelt down and filled his water bottles, using his suit's purification system to make sure it was safe to drink. As he worked, something caught his eye. The rocks at the bottom of the stream weren't random. They formed patterns, straight lines and perfect circles that couldn't be natural. Jake pulled out his camera and took pictures, then used his portable lab kit to test the water chemistry. The results made him sit back in surprise. The water contained trace amounts of elements that shouldn't exist in stable form. According to everything he knew about chemistry, these isotopes should have decayed millions of years ago. But here they were, somehow being maintained in a stable state. Jake stood up and looked around with new eyes. The jungle wasn't just random growth, there were patterns here too if you knew how to look for them. The largest trees formed rough geometric shapes when viewed from above. The clearings appeared at regular intervals. Even the animal paths seemed to follow specific routes that made no sense for normal wildlife. He pulled out his long-range scanner and did a deep sweep of the area. The readings showed that the hollow space below wasn't just a cave or underground river. It was artificial, with straight walls and right angles that nature never created. Jake's heart started beating faster. This was it. This was what he had come here to find. The problem was figuring out how to reach it. 3 kilometers of solid rock and dirt stood between him and whatever was down there. His equipment included a small drilling unit, but it would take months to dig through that much material. He spent the next 2 hours walking in widening circles around the area, using his scanners to map the underground structure. What he found made his hands shake with excitement. The hollow space wasn't just big, it was huge, nearly 2 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. It had the proportions of a building or a ship. As the sun began to set, Jake made camp beside the stream. The jungle became even stranger at night. The glowing flowers became brighter, and new sounds joined the chorus of animal calls. Somewhere, in the distance, something was making a low humming sound, so deep that Jake felt it in his bones more than heard it with his ears. He tried to contact Captain Hayes and her research ship, but the thick atmosphere was interfering with his communications. All he got was static and broken fragments of voice. He was truly alone on this world, with no way to call for help if something went wrong. That night, Jake barely slept. Every sound made him jump, and twice he thought he saw lights moving through the trees. But when he used his flashlight to investigate, he found nothing but more jungle. It was on the second day that Jake found the entrance. He had been following a dry riverbed, thinking it might lead to a cave system that could provide access to the underground structure. The bed was lined with the same strangely patterned stones he had seen in the stream, but these were larger and more obviously artificial. Then the riverbed simply ended at what looked like a solid wall of rock covered in vines. But when Jake cleared away the plants, he found that the rock was too smooth, too perfect. It wasn't natural stone at all. His metal detector went crazy as he ran it over the surface. Whatever was behind this wall was made of the same exotic metals his equipment had been detecting underground. Jake found what looked like a seam running vertically down the center of the wall. When he pressed his hand against it, the wall felt warm. Jake spent 3 hours trying different ways to open what was clearly some kind of door. He tried pushing, pulling, and even hitting it with a rock. Nothing worked. The door remained sealed tight. It was pure frustration that led to his breakthrough. Jake leaned against the door, tired and angry, and placed both hands flat against its surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the humming sound he had been hearing grew louder. The door began to vibrate under his hands. Strange symbols appeared in the metal, glowing with the same soft light as the jungle flowers. The symbols moved and changed, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar, like writing he had seen before but couldn't quite remember. With a sound like a deep breath, the door split down the middle and slid open. Cool air rushed out from the opening, carrying scents of metal and something else. Something that reminded Jake of ozone after a lightning strike. Emergency lights flickered on inside, revealing a corridor that stretched away into darkness. Jake stood at the threshold, his heart pounding. The corridor was clearly artificial, with smooth walls and a ceiling high enough for beings much taller than humans. The lights along the walls were unlike anything in current galactic technology. They didn't seem to have a power source, but they glowed with steady white light. He checked his air supply and made sure his equipment was secure. Then Jake Morrison, the human that aliens had laughed at, stepped through the doorway into a place that wasn't supposed to exist. The door sealed, shut behind him with the same breathing sound. The lights grew brighter, as if responding to his presence. And from somewhere deep in the structure ahead, Jake heard the sound of machinery starting up for the first time in thousands of years. He was no longer alone on Verdania Prime. Whatever had built this place was about to meet the first visitor it had received in a very long time. And somehow Jake had the feeling that it had been waiting specifically for him. Jake walked slowly down the corridor, his flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead. The emergency lights continued to flicker on as he moved forward, creating a path of white light that stretched into the distance. The walls were made of the same smooth metal as the door, and they seemed to pulse with a faint inner glow. His footsteps echoed strangely in the space. The sound didn't bounce back the way it should have in a normal hallway. Instead, it seemed to be absorbed, and then released as a softer, more musical tone. Jake realized that the walls were somehow filtering and changing the sounds he made. After walking for 10 minutes, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Jake stopped and stared up at a ceiling that disappeared into darkness high above. The room was so large that his flashlight couldn't reach the far walls. But as he stepped into the space, more lights began to come on automatically. What they revealed took Jake's breath away. The chamber was filled with machines and control panels that looked nothing like any technology he had ever seen. Instead of the angular mechanical designs that humans and other galactic species used, everything here had flowing, organic curves. The machines looked almost alive, as if they had grown rather than been built. In the center of the room stood something that could only be described as a throne. It was made of the same glowing metal as everything else, but it was clearly designed for someone to sit in. Cables and tubes connected it to the surrounding machines, and the air around it shimmered with energy. Jake approached the throne carefully, his scanner beeping faster and faster as he got closer. The energy readings were off the charts. Whatever this device was, it was drawing power from sources his equipment couldn't identify. As he reached out to touch the throne's armrest, a voice spoke behind him. "Scanning new operator." Jake spun around, his heart jumping into his throat, but there was no one there. The voice had come from everywhere at once, filling the entire chamber with sound that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Genetic markers confirmed." The voice continued in perfect English. "Welcome aboard the Eternal Sentinel, Guardian Jake Morrison." "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice cracking with fear. "Show yourself." "I am the ship's intelligence," the voice replied. Its tone was neither male nor female, but somehow warm and welcoming. "I have been waiting for you for 53,412 years, 7 months, and 16 days. Jake's legs felt weak. He sat down hard on the nearest surface, which happened to be a control panel that immediately lit up, with symbols he couldn't read. "Ship," he managed to say. "This whole place is a ship." "The Eternal Sentinel is a deep space exploration and defense vessel," the voice explained. "I am its artificial intelligence. My creators, the architects, built me to wait for the arrival of humanity." "The architects?" Jake's mind was racing. "I've never heard of them. They're not in any galactic records." "The architects ruled this galaxy long before any of the current civilizations evolved beyond primitive stages," the AI said. Holographic displays suddenly materialized around Jake, showing star charts, historical timelines, and images of beings that looked like tall, graceful humans with silver skin and glowing eyes. They were your predecessors, Jake Morrison. The first intelligent species to achieve true mastery over space and time. But they faced a great threat, something that returns to this galaxy every 50,000 years to consume all advanced life. Jake stared at the holographic images. The architect's technology was so advanced, it looked like magic. Their cities floated in space without visible support, and their ships moved between dimensions as easily as swimming through water. What happened to them? Jake asked. They sacrificed themselves to stop the last invasion of the Devourers, the AI replied. But before they died, the architects prepared for the next cycle. They created ships like me and hid them throughout the galaxy. They also seeded certain worlds with their genetic legacy, guiding the evolution of species that might one day inherit their knowledge. More holographic displays appeared, showing Earth's history from space. Jake watched in amazement as the images revealed how human development had been subtly influenced over thousands of years. Crashed architect probes providing inspiration for major technological leaps. Hidden installations affecting human brain development. Genetic modifications so subtle that no one had ever detected them. You mean humans were created by the architects? Jake asked. Not created, the AI corrected. Enhanced. Humanity evolved naturally, but the architects saw potential in your species that they did not find in others. Your creativity, your determination, your ability to form genuine bonds with artificial intelligence. These traits made you suitable inheritors of architect technology. Jake stood up and walked to the throne. Up close, he could see that it was covered in thousands of tiny sensors and neural interfaces. This is meant for a human? It is meant for you specifically, Jake Morrison. The ship has been analyzing your genetic pattern since you entered. You carry the correct markers to safely interface with architect technology. Please, sit down. Jake hesitated. What will happen if I do? You will become the ship's guardian. Your consciousness will partially merge with mine, giving you control over all ship systems. You will gain access to the complete architect database of knowledge and history, and you will learn about the great darkness that approaches. Jake looked around the vast chamber one more time. All his life he had been searching for evidence of ancient civilizations. Now he had found something beyond his wildest dreams. But the AI's words about a returning threat made him afraid. These devourers, Jake said. When are they coming back? Soon, the AI replied. Long-range sensors have detected the first signs of their approach. The current galactic civilizations have perhaps 50 years before the invasion begins in earnest. Jake thought about all the aliens who had laughed at humanity's primitive technology. They had no idea what was coming. Can this ship stop them? 1. Ship cannot stop the Devourers, the AI admitted. But there are others like me hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for humans to awaken them. Together, we might have a chance. Jake sat down in the throne. Immediately, he felt a tingling sensation, as the neural interfaces made contact with his skin through his suit. The ship's systems came alive around him, and suddenly Jake could sense every part of the massive vessel. The Eternal Sentinel was enormous, over 2 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. It had been buried under the jungle for thousands of years, its systems in hibernation mode. But now, with a human guardian to guide it, the ship was waking up. Jake gasped as information flooded into his mind. He could see through sensors placed all over the ship. He could feel the power flowing through conduits and the life support systems maintaining perfect atmosphere in every compartment. Most importantly, he could access the ship's memory banks. The history of the galaxy unfolded before him like a vast book. He saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations all following the same cycle. They would grow and prosper for thousands of years, reaching heights of technology and culture. Then the Devourers would return, consuming everything in their path before disappearing back into the void between dimensions. The current galactic species, Jake realized with growing horror, they're not the first intelligent races to evolve. They're just the latest in a long line. Correct, the AI confirmed. The Zephyrians, Mortons, Kavari, and all the others. Their civilizations have existed for only a few thousand years. They were uplifted from primitive states by architect technology left behind from the previous cycle. They were given just enough knowledge to maintain galactic infrastructure, but not enough to understand the true pattern of history. Jake saw it all now. The galactic civilizations that looked down on humanity weren't ancient and wise. They were children playing with toys they didn't understand, ignorant of the cycle that had repeated itself for millions of years. And now, it's humanity's turn to inherit the galaxy, Jake said. If you can survive what's coming, the AI replied. The Devourers are already stirring. Their scouts will arrive within years, not decades. The galaxy must be prepared. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The human race, the species that other aliens mocked as primitive, was apparently the galaxy's only hope for survival. Through the ship's sensors, Jake could detect movement in the jungle above. Large shapes were gathering around the buried vessel, drawn by the energy signatures of its awakening systems. Captain Hayes, Jake said, suddenly remembering his colleague. I need to contact my people. Already done, the AI replied. I have sent a coded message to the human research vessel Meridian. Captain Lisa Hayes and her team are en route to this location. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the ship. Maybe the aliens had been wrong about humanity after all. The news of Jake's discovery spread through galactic communication networks faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, every major species in the galaxy knew that a human had found and activated an ancient warship of unknown origin. The reaction was not what Jake had hoped for. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her research vessel Meridian, watching as Galactic Council ships took positions around Verdania Prime. There were dozens of them: Zephyrian battle cruisers, Morton, defense platforms, Kavari attack squadrons, and ships from half a dozen other species. All of them had their weapons pointed at the jungle where Jake had disappeared. They're scared, said Commander Rick Stone, Lisa's second-in-command. He was studying the sensor readings from the alien fleet. Look at their formation. This isn't an investigation force. This is an invasion fleet. Lisa nodded grimly. The coded message from Jake had been brief but clear. He had found something big, something that changed everything they thought they knew about galactic history. But the aliens obviously didn't want humanity to have it. On the planet below, Jake was learning just how frightened the galactic civilizations had become. Through the Eternal Sentinel's advanced sensors, he could monitor all the alien communications. What he heard made his blood run cold. The humans must not be allowed to control this technology, Vextar was saying to the assembled fleet commanders. They are too young, too unpredictable. One human with access to such power could destroy entire star systems. We should have prevented this, added a Morton admiral through its mechanical translator. The humans should never have been allowed to explore the outer rim alone. Their primitive minds cannot handle advanced technology safely. Jake sat in the command throne, his consciousness partially merged with the ship's artificial intelligence. Through this connection, he could feel the vast power sleeping within the Eternal Sentinel. Weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Shields that could deflect the energy of a star. Engines that could move the ship between dimensions. But he also felt something else. Sadness. The AI was showing him records of previous awakening cycles, times when other ships like this one had tried to prepare the galaxy for the Devourer invasion. Each time the existing civilizations had refused to listen. Each time they had tried to destroy or control the architect technology rather than use it properly. They always react this way, the AI explained, its voice echoing in Jake's. The uplifted species cannot accept that they are not the pinnacle of galactic evolution. They cannot admit that their technology comes from beings who understood the universe far better than they do. But surely they'll listen when they learn about the Devourers, Jake said. When they understand the threat. Will they? The AI asked. Or will they convince themselves that the threat is not real, that the architects were wrong, that their own superior numbers and technology can handle any problem? Jake was beginning to understand. Through the ship's historical records, he could see the pattern repeating itself across millions of years. Advanced civilizations would arise, become proud and confident in their abilities, and then refuse to believe they needed help from anyone else. When the Devourers came, these civilizations would fight bravely and die completely. On the surface above, the first Galactic Council troops were landing. Jake watched through the ship's sensors as thousands of alien soldiers spread out through the jungle, all carrying weapons designed to cut through any known material. They were looking for the entrance he had used, but the ship's camouflage systems had already sealed and hidden it. Admiral Kethvar of the Kavari fleet is demanding that you surrender yourself and the ship, the AI reported. He claims authority under Galactic Council emergency protocols. Jake almost laughed. Emergency protocols? They're the ones pointing weapons at a research site. The Council has declared the ship a threat to galactic security, the AI continued. They are demanding immediate access to all ship systems and technology. If you refuse, they will use force to breach the hull. Jake felt a surge of anger. These were the same aliens who had mocked humanity as primitive and worthless. Now they wanted to steal the technology that Jake had risked his life to find. Can they actually hurt this ship? Jake asked. Their weapons are powerful by current galactic standards, the AI replied. But they are based on principles the architects mastered millions of years ago. The Eternal Sentinel's defenses are designed to withstand forces they cannot imagine. Jake made his decision. He opened a communication channel to the alien fleet. This is Jake Morrison aboard the Eternal Sentinel, he said, his voice carrying across all frequencies simultaneously. I'm willing to discuss this situation, but not while you have weapons pointed at me. The response came immediately from Admiral Kethvar. The Kavari's clicking voice was full of anger. Human, you are in possession of technology that belongs to the galactic community. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. This technology doesn't belong to the galactic community, Jake replied calmly. It belongs to humanity. It was specifically designed for us. Impossible, snarled Vextar's voice. No species would create weapons for primitives like humans. Kind felt the AI's amusement at that statement. Through their shared consciousness, he accessed the ship's complete historical database and began transmitting it to every vessel in the alien fleet. The silence that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Jake could imagine the alien scientists and historians frantically analyzing the data, trying to find flaws or deceptions. But the records were complete and undeniable. The current galactic civilizations were not ancient and wise. They were recent arrivals, uplifted from primitive states by architect technology. Their own histories only went back a few thousand years because that was when they had been given intelligence and technology by systems the architects had left behind. The Zephyrians had been simple hunter-gatherers when architect probes found them. The Mortons had been nothing more than primitive slime creatures. The Kavari had been insects with no more intelligence than Earth's ants. This is fabricated data, Admiral Kethvar finally announced, but his voice had lost its confidence. Human, deception designed to make us doubt ourselves. Then explain the technology gaps, Jake challenged. Explain why your civilizations have no record of developing faster than light travel, but somehow always had it. Explain why your energy weapons are based on principles none of your scientists actually understand. More silence. Jake could sense the confusion and fear spreading through the alien fleet. Their entire understanding of themselves and their place in the galaxy was crumbling. Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, chose that moment to arrive. Her diplomatic vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and immediately began broadcasting. This is Ambassador Vasquez to all Council forces, she announced. I demand an immediate ceasefire and the establishment of neutral ground for negotiations. The humans have awakened something that should have remained buried, Admiral Kethvar replied. This is no longer a diplomatic matter. On the contrary, Elena said smoothly. This is entirely a diplomatic matter. The ship responded to human genetic markers. By galactic law, that makes it human property. Any attempt to seize it by force would be an act of war against Earth. Jake smiled as he listened to the exchange. Elena was good at her job, She was forcing the aliens to choose between admitting they were wrong or starting a war they couldn't win. But Jake knew the real test was still coming. The historical records were clear about what happened next in the cycle. The existing civilizations would either accept the truth and work with humanity, or they would try to destroy the architect ships to prevent anyone else from using them. Through the ship's long-range sensors, Jake detected something that made his blood freeze. At the very edge of sensor range, reality itself was beginning to ripple and distort. The Devourers were stirring earlier than expected, drawn by the energy signature of the awakening ship. The enemy approaches, the AI warned. The current cycle is about to end, whether the galactic civilizations are ready or not. Jake opened another communication channel, this one broadcasting to every inhabited world in the galaxy. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said. "I'm speaking to you from aboard an architect vessel called the Eternal Sentinel. I have information that will save your lives, but only if you're willing to listen to what a primitive human has to tell you." The fate of the galaxy now hung in the balance, and a species that had been laughed at for their backward technology held the only key to survival. The edge of the galaxy began to tear apart 3 weeks after Jake's broadcast. The first reports came from automated monitoring stations in the outer rim. Space itself was rippling like water, and entire star systems were simply vanishing from sensors. Jake sat in the command throne of the Eternal Sentinel, his consciousness merged with the ship's vast intelligence. Through the galactic communication network, he could hear the panic spreading from world to world as the Devourer advance scouts began their work. "Kepler station has gone dark," reported a Zephyrian commander. "No distress signal, no energy readings, it's just gone. 3 more systems in Sector 47 have disappeared," added a Morton observer. "The phenomenon is moving toward populated space at incredible speed." Captain Lisa Hayes stood beside Jake's throne, watching the holographic displays that showed the galaxy-wide catastrophe unfolding. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Days, not weeks," Jake replied, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance of the ship's AI. "The Devourers are moving faster than in previous cycles. Something has changed. The Galactic Council emergency session was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other, some demanding immediate evacuation of core worlds, others insisting that their combined fleets could stop any threat. Admiral Kethvar of the Kavari was one of the loudest voices. "We have the finest military forces in galactic history," he clicked angrily. "Whatever these Devourers are, they cannot stand against our united strength." But Dr. Elena Vasquez had different information. She stood at the center of the council chamber, displaying tactical data that Jake had transmitted from the Eternal. "Sentinel, your fleets won't even slow them down," Elena said bluntly. "The Devourers exist partially outside normal spacetime. Conventional weapons pass right through them. Energy shields are useless. They consume the very fabric of reality itself." "Then what do you propose?" demanded Vextar, his blue skin shifting to colors that showed fear and anger. "That we surrender our worlds to this human and his mysterious ship?" "I propose we listen to the species that was specifically prepared for this moment," Elena replied. "The architects left detailed instructions for fighting the Devourers, but those instructions can only be accessed through human neural patterns." The council chamber erupted in angry shouts. For thousands of years, these species had ruled the galaxy, confident in their superiority over primitive races like humanity. The idea that they needed human help was almost impossible for them to accept. Meanwhile, Jake was coordinating with other awakening architect ships across the galaxy. His broadcast had triggered responses from buried vessels on 17 different worlds. Other humans, archaeologists, explorers, even some colonists, were finding their way to the hidden ships and becoming guardians. "Guardian Morrison," came a voice through the ship's communication system. "This is Guardian Amy Foster aboard the Voidwalker. I'm a mining engineer from the Centauri colony. This ship just activated when I got near it." "Welcome to the most important job in the galaxy," Jake replied. "Are you getting the tactical downloads?" "Yes, and they're terrifying," Amy responded. "These Devourer things have destroyed hundreds of civilizations. How are we supposed to stop them with just a few ships? We're not, Jake admitted, but we can teach them to feed somewhere else. Through the merged consciousness he shared with the ship's AI, Jake had learned the true nature of the Devourers. They weren't evil in any sense that organic beings could understand. They were entities that existed across multiple dimensions, feeding on the quantum energy that held reality together. To them, consuming inhabited galaxies was no different than humans eating plants. But the architects had discovered something crucial. The Devourers could be communicated with, negotiated with, even redirected to empty regions of space where they could feed without destroying civilizations. The problem was that this kind of communication required technology and neural patterns that only the architect ships possessed, and those ships would only respond to humans. The first major battle happened in the Proxima system, where a Galactic Council fleet of 200 ships tried to intercept a Devourer advance unit. Jake watched through long-range sensors as the alien vessels opened fire with every weapon they had. The results were exactly what the architect records had predicted. Energy beams passed harmlessly through the Devourer ships, which existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that conventional physics couldn't reach. Kinetic weapons simply ceased to exist when they made contact with the enemy hulls. The Devourer response was swift and terrible. Reality around the Council fleet began to unravel. Ships that had been solid metal and energy became transparent, then faded away entirely as the quantum foundations of their existence were consumed. 200 ships, Rick Stone said quietly, as he watched the tactical display. Gone in less than 10 minutes. But Jake was already moving. The Eternal Sentinel lifted out of Verdania Prime's atmosphere for the first time in 50,000 years, its ancient engines creating distortions in space-time that the Devourer scouts immediately noticed. "This is Guardian Morrison to all Devourer units," Jake broadcast on frequencies that existed between dimensions. "I speak for the Inheritor species. We wish to negotiate." The response came as a flood of alien thoughts directly into Jake's mind. The Devourers were ancient beyond imagination, older than galaxies themselves. They had been feeding on the quantum energy of reality since the universe was young. To them, the brief civilizations that rose and fell in each galaxy were barely noticeable, but they recognized the architect technology. They remembered the previous negotiations, the agreements that had been made and broken over cosmic time. The Inheritors wake. The Devourer collective consciousness acknowledged. The cycle begins again. Will this iteration prove worthy, or will it feed us as the others did? Jake felt the weight of the entire galaxy's survival pressing down on him. Through the ship's sensors, he could see Devourer forces massing at the galaxy's edge. Thousands of reality-consuming vessels that could strip away the foundations of existence itself. "We offer the same bargain the architects made," Jake replied. "Spare the inhabited regions, and we will guide you to the empty spaces between galaxies where you can feed without destroying life." The previous Inheritors made similar promises, the Devourers responded. Yet they grew proud and forgot their obligations. The cycle resumed. Civilizations fell. Reality was consumed. Jake understood now why the architects had prepared so carefully, why they had spent millions of years guiding human evolution. Previous Inheritor species had tried to fight the Devourers through force, or had attempted to hide from them. Both approaches had failed. "We're different," Jake said, and he meant it. "Humans don't seek to rule the galaxy. We seek to understand it. We'll honor the agreement." The negotiation that followed took place across multiple dimensions and lasted subjective hours while only minutes passed in normal time. Jake found himself speaking not just for humanity, but for every living thing in the Milky Way galaxy. The Devourers tested him, probing his memories and motivations, examining human nature through the lens of their vast experience. They had seen countless species rise to power and become corrupted by it. They needed to know that humans were truly different. Finally, the ancient entities reached their decision. "The cycle is suspended," they announced. "The Inheritors may guide us to the empty spaces, but know this. If your species proves false, if you break faith as others have done, we will return. And next time, there will be no negotiation." Jake, felt the devourer forces beginning to withdraw from the galaxy's populated regions. Through the ship's sensors, he could detect their movement toward the void between galaxies, where they could feed on dark matter and quantum fluctuations without threatening any form of life. The galactic communication networks exploded with confused and relieved chatter as monitoring stations detected the enemy retreat. Species that had been preparing for extinction suddenly found themselves safe. But Jake knew the real work was just beginning. Humanity had inherited not just the architect ships, but the responsibility to guard the galaxy against the next cycle. And that meant taking their place as the galaxy's leaders, whether the other species liked it or not. "Captain Hayes," Jake said, turning to face his colleague, "contact Earth. Tell them to prepare for the biggest change in human history." The age of alien laughter at human expense was over. The age of human guardianship had begun.